Hello everyone, hopefully you can all hear me, and welcome to another 41 Club Connects. So I'll hand you straight over to Peter now to do the formal welcome. Over to National President Peter.
Thanks, Don. Good evening, everybody, ladies and gents. Before we start, I'd like to wish you all a very happy Easter. Hope you've all got your overcoats ready. Summer's gone. We did at least have 2 days of it. We've got our great friends from South Africa tonight, so we're looking forward to a great evening. About 313 on at the moment, creeping up. So I'll hand back to Don, who will tell you about the next events, and then we'll look forward to hearing our friends from Cape Town. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. As everyone will hopefully have seen from the emails that went out yesterday, we've got a full program of events going out into May so far. Next week, we've got Chris Brindley, MBE, as the guest speaker. Now, he's chairman of the Rugby League World Cup 2021, which is happening in England at the moment. This meeting isn't only for rugby league fans, and I'm a Wigan fan myself, it's actually of general interest to everyone, because imagine if you were organising a major international event and you were appointed to head it all up, and it's going to happen in 2021, you're appointed to chairmanship in 2019, and then suddenly something major happens in 2020, which could change everything. On the 15th of April, which is either the Snooker World Championship, we've got a snooker special, and we've got two people you might have heard of in the past. We've got John Parrott and Dennis Taylor as our guest speakers that evening. It's going to be a very special evening, and we'll hope to see all of you there at that. On the 22nd of April, we've got Kevin Connolly, who's a great comedian. On the 29th of April, we're guests of the RNLI, and we'll be given a virtual tour of a lifeboat station, amongst other things. And moving on, amongst the other things, to 6th of May, which is another really special evening. It's in the run-up to VE Day this year, and we thought the VE Day theme would be highly appropriate.
That's on full.
And we've got Norman Bartlett, who's a World War II Royal Navy veteran. So that should be another very, very special evening. And enough of what's coming up. Let's move on to what you're here to enjoy tonight. And I'm going to hand over to Paul Jackson, who's going to actually introduce the guest speakers for this evening. Over to you, Paul.
Hi, thank you, sir. President Peter, 41 Club National Committee, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from Rugby Roundtable 113. It's eminent 41 Club, Ladies Circle and Tangent, and everybody in the village of Willenhall. Thank you to Don for the excellent programme of speakers that we've already experienced. Last week's one with the Yorkshire Shepherdess was a classic, so thank you very much indeed for that. And can I also say a big thank you to the national team for setting up our buddy system. I've just joined it. It's a tremendous initiative that you've done, and I'm sure it's very much needed and will be used by those who do need it. And so to this evening. As a lifelong historian, it's my absolute privilege to introduce you to some outstanding living history tonight in the form of Christo Brand. You'll get used to his wonderful Afrikaans accent. You'll be a fluent Afrikaans speaker by the end of tonight, and you'll be finely tuned to every word that sounds like "ja" for most of the time. But in the first instance, I'm going to introduce you to my very good friend out in Hermanus, near to Cape Town, Andrew Russell. For those of you who know Cape Town, Andrew was one of those dynamic South African wing forwards at Bishop School and did such a good job. They let him go back to teach there. And now he spends most of his time on Hermanus Golf Course, but also looking after Christo's program and all the visitors that come to that beautiful country called South Africa. Good evening, Mr. Russell.
Hello, Paul.
Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll be able to get going. Okay, Paul, can you see that all right there?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, so warm A warm welcome from sunny South Africa. As Paul said, my name is Andrew Russell, and it is my pleasure to join the 41 Club this evening to take you on a journey of two men from very different backgrounds. So we're going to start with one of Nelson Mandela's quotes: "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than the opposite." And so our journey starts with a young boy called Christo Brunt, growing up on a farm, in fact, not far from where I am in the Overberg region of South Africa. So Christo, welcome to you. And if you would like to just start our journey this evening by sharing with our friends what life was like for you as a young boy growing up on that farm.
Good evening. As a young boy growing up on that farm, I was the only white child playing with African children. My father was very poor. He was just a foreman. And one day I was disrespectful to elderly African man when my father gave me a hiding and said to me, "The person can be black, but a human being like us. God has made us all different colors, and we must respect each other as human beings." So I grew up on that farm with respect elderly people.
And many years earlier, we have another young boy called Nelson Mandela, growing up in the Eastern Cape village of Punu. And there is one of the very few photographs of this young boy called Nelson Mandela, who wrote the following: "It was in that village of Punu that I spent the happiest years of my boyhood, and whence I trace my earliest memories. Punu was situated in a narrow grassy valley, crisscrossed by clear streams and overlooked by green hills. There were no roads, only paths through the grass, worn away by barefoot boys and women. From an early age, I spent most of my free time in the veld, playing and fighting with other boys. From these days, I take my love of the veld, of open spaces." Nelson Mandela. And so we see these two young boys both growing up in a rural area with wide open spaces, no signs of apartheid, lots of freedom, surrounded by friends and family, where they both learned to respect adults and to enjoy their carefree primary school days. But this is not going to last forever, because at the age of 12, Christo's family are forced to move off the farm. Christo, can you now share with our friends why you were forced to move off the farm, and why, when you finished high school, did you decide to become a prison warder in South Africa?
At the age of 12, my father developed pneumonia on the farm. The farmer moved us off the farm. We moved to the city. We stayed with family in a small room in the city. The suburb where we stayed was a suburb for whites only. So my new friends was white guys I played with on a daily basis. But a year before I left school, one of my best friends was called up for military service. That year, it was compulsory for all white children to join the military for 2 years. And that day, when I see my friend off on Cape Town Station, he said to me, "You don't really want to join the military. You don't want to fight black people in the townships. You don't want to fight black people on the borders. You want to become a medical doctor. But the government said first 2 years of your life for the military." What happened 6 months after his training? He was sent to the borders of Angola. He was shot by so-called terrorists. That day when we sat in the church, the priest said, "What hero this gentleman was for our country. How this gentleman protect our country against the black enemy." For me, sitting in that church, the gentleman was not a hero for me because he didn't want to be there. The blacks was not my enemy. And I said to myself, I will look for something alternative, not to join the military. So what happened in that last year for me on school, grade 12, a gentleman visited our school. They're looking for people who can guard prisoners, prison wardens. I was not interested in that till he mentioned exemption from military service. Then I think I will have a chat with this gentleman. After our conversation, I explained to him, I want to become an electrician. He said that's a right opportunity to become a prison warden. After your training, you apply to work in the prison workshops, become an electrician, and you can be trained to become an electrician and help prisoners become electricians. So then I signed up and I was sent for my training to Kroonstad as a prison warden.
And in a very similar vein, we have a high school pupil, Nelson Mandela. There he is, finishing his high school education in the Eastern Cape, and then making the decision to move to Johannesburg with his cousin. And so now we see these two men both moving to the city, where suddenly they find a lack of freedom. They start seeing the first signs of apartheid, having to make new friends, no more wide open spaces to play in, and both of them having to decide what to do after high school and having to get a job. And so we find this 18-year-old boy. Some of you might have grandchildren or children at the age of 18. And here is Christo, having trained, is now sent with his first position to work on this infamous island just off the coast of Cape Town. Here is the ferry which transported Christo to the island when he had to go and report for duty. And this is what faced this 18-year-old boy when he arrived on Robben Island. Christo, can you take up the story now when you reported for duty that first morning as an 18-year-old warder on Robben Island?
That first morning when I report for duty, the head of the prison welcomed us. We were 21 youngsters between the age of 18 and 20 arrived on the island, and he told us we're going to meet the biggest criminals in the history of South Africa. He told us these criminals have mostly life sentences. Some of them have longer than life, and we are here to break the spirit of these guys. These guys are here to do hard labor. So that was my first introduction by the head of the prison. After that, they sent me to the isolation section that morning. The sergeant gave me the key and he said, just open the outside doors that we first can count the prisoners. And when I opened the first door, I see an elderly African man stand up from the floor. He greeted me with respect, very humble, polite, and he slept on 2 mats, 3 blankets, and a toilet bucket in his cell. And it was very cold that morning. I don't see any tattoos on his face. I was shocked to see such an old guy in prison. So I go to the second cell. I see this guy got life plus 15 years. I think that can be a big gangster. But he's also an elderly person, greet me with respect. So I just read the names, Andrew Mlangeni, Walter Sisulu, Raymond Mushlaba, Nelson Mandela, and all these names. But I never heard those names before in my life. That was the first introduction to this lifetime prisoners.
And then Christo is now rotated around the island. He spends some time working at the limestone quarry, which was the place where the prisoners broke down the limestone. And then after 3 months, he ends up in this office called the census office. Christo, can you now share what happened when you reported for duty in your new position in this room called the census office?
That morning when I report for duty at the census office, my superior warrant officer Dupree welcomed me, and he said to me, Brandt, just help the other guys in the section to unpack these apple boxes and count these cards. We urgently need the totals. When we open these boxes, throw it out on the table, count the cards, back into the boxes, I observed it was birthday cards. All the birthday cards was for Nelson Mandela's 60th birthday. So we count these cards. We found 55,000 plus a few odd cards. Massives. Then the sergeant after that said, we must identify where the cards come from. So we unpack it again. We throw in boxes from Germany, UK, America, Spain, all these different countries. Then after that, we found only that there's 12 cards from South Africa. I asked the sergeant, why 12 from South Africa? Don't South Africans don't know Nelson Mandela? I didn't know Nelson Mandela at all. I only heard the name for the first time on the island. His answer to me was, he said, Brandt, if anybody in South Africa dared to send a card for Nelson Mandela, and the police identified that person should have been arrested, 90 days solid confinement, electrical shock, tortured, maybe killed, maybe disappeared. People was afraid to correspond with these prisoners. Out of these massive of cards, Mandela received only 6 from his direct family. All the other cards we take to the single quarters. We've got boilers there where we burn the cards and destroy them.
And so now this young warder realizes that there's one particular prisoner called Nelson Mandela who seems to be known all over the world. And Christo is now moved to a different job, and that is to handle visitors to the island. And on one occasion, Christo gets told by his supervisor that Winnie Mandela, the wife of Nelson, is on her way to the island. Christo gets told to go and prepare Nelson Mandela for his visit. Christo, can you now take up the story when you went to Nelson Mandela to tell him that he had a visitor, and take us through the walk that the two of you went on down to the visitor center?
That morning when I walked to Nelson Mandela, informed him about his visit, he just asked me, Mr. Brandt, just give me a few minutes that I can quickly get dressed in my prison uniform, which I put aside for Sunday's inspection. After that, he reported to me he's ready for his visit. I put him a leg irons. I lift up the chains for him. They could have taken it in his hands, and I can then march him out of prison. When we are distant from the prison to the visiting center, he looked back. He asked me, Mr. Brandt, where are you come from? You put the leg irons smooth around my ankles to lift up the chains for me, and you treat me with respect. I look at him. I said, Mandela, I grew up on a farm, and my father said I must respect elderly people. His reaction immediately was, that's good news, Mr. Brandt. You can help me, give me advice in my prison garden. In a prison courtyard at the back, Mandela has a small piece of land where he plants some chilies, tomatoes, and onions. That was mostly to spice up the bad food. I didn't comment on that. We walked on. A while later, he looked back again. He asked me, Mr. Brandt, is your parents still alive? I said, yes. He said, sent him my greetings. That was something very strange for me. We walked on, and then just before we get to the visiting location, he asked me, Mr. Brandt, are you studying? I said, no. He said, you must make use of the time to study. Study is the future of our country. Through studies, you can get promotion. You can become the head of the prison, and you can understand us as prisoners better. I didn't comment on that. I just take him to the single cell in the visiting center and lock him in there.
And so now Christo goes to the boat, which you saw earlier, to fetch the visitors. And he sees one of the visitors is Winnie Mandela, who takes off her raincoat, then takes a blanket off which she had around her body, and he observes that she has a backpack. When she takes the backpack off, Christo realizes that she's brought a baby infant to Robben Island. And Christo now goes to her to explain that she is not allowed to bring the baby to the island. Christo, will you now go through what happened with the rest of that visit once you said to Winnie Mandela that you were not allowed to show the baby to Nelson?
That time I take the visitors all to the waiting room. After that, we put the prisoners in a different cubicles because visits was not contact visit, but through a small tiny glass. And that year's Mandela get one visit every 3 months for 30 minutes by one person only. Children was only allowed at the age of 16, but African people never see their children at 16, only at the age of 18. So then I collect Winnie Mandela, bring her to the waiting room, visiting booth, and instruct her to leave the baby behind, where she was still begging me to take it along, which my answer was no. But when she's in a cubicle, the steel panel open, and they could have started communicate with each other by telephone, because that was recorded for National Intelligence and Security Branch. During this conversation, she told her husband, Mandela, she had brought his grandchild to Robben Island. That moment, Mandela looked back. I was behind him. He begged me, please, Mr. Brandt, is it possible just to see the infant through the window? Which my answer to him was, I said, Mandela, you know the prison regulations. You're not allowed to see a child. You can have seen the disappointment in his face. He carried on with his visit. A while later, my superior walked in, touched my shoulder. He said, Brandt, tell your prisoner 5 minutes left of his visit. That moment, when informed Mandela about 5 minutes left of his visit, he looked back, he see my superior passed. He begged me again, please, Mr. Brandt, just ask the warrant officer if it's possible, if I can see my wife on a distance through the small window when she walked away from the building with the infant. I walked to my superior, asked him what Mandela requested, and he looked at me and he said, Brandt, if you can get hold of that baby without Mandela's wife, no, we can show him the child. So I walked back to Mandela, said to him, sorry, the answer is no. The window closed, and Winnie Mandela has been taken back to the waiting room. But that moment when Mandela stand up, he looked at his notes and he said, he forgets something. He asked me, please, Mr. Brandt, pass this message to my wife. And that moment, my superior walked in, asked me, what is a delay? I explained him, Mandela asked me that he must pass a message to his wife. She must apply for visit for Christmas Day. That was more than 6 months in advance. My superior immediately said, Brandt, fetch his wife back. Mandela, 1 minute. You can see your wife again to tell you herself. When I walked to the waiting room, Winnie Mandela already had the baby infant in her arms. There was rotation of visitors. I look at the situation, I walked straight to her and I said, ma'am, can I hold the baby? I never held the African child. She pushed it in my arms. He grabbed the handbags. He tried to bribe me with money. I said, ma'am, I'm not want your money. I'm not show your husband that baby, but please go back into the visiting booth. And when she's in the visiting booth, I locked her in. I sneaked to the side of Mandela. After Mandela passed his message, my superior closed the window. Mandela see me in the passage. He came straight to me. In that moment, he take the baby out of my arms, kissed the child twice, and there was tears in his eyes. And it became quite emotional. That same moment, Winnie knocked on the door. She's locked in. I take the baby back from him, go to her side, apologize. I locked in, gave her the infant back. She was still begging me to show him the child. When she came to the mainland, the media was waiting for her because they want information from the island. But the police was also there to take her away. She was under banning orders. But she managed to tell the media she smuggled this baby to Robben Island, but could have not shown her husband on a distance. On the island, Mandela just thanked me what I've done. He didn't share it with his comrades. He knew if he shared it, he should have lost his studies, visits, and privileges. I should have been charged, smuggled with a prisoner, which was called a terrorist. In a minimum sentence, they promised our warders was 5 years imprisonment. That secret was between me and Mandela for nearly 20 years till he became the president of our country.
Okay, so this is the first remarkable interaction between these two men. And here is a note that Winnie Mandela wrote in a book, which she presented Christo. My dearest Brandt, wonderful memories we share are priceless. I remember how you refused to accept a gift from me because you were and still are so principled. Thanks for all the wonderful things you did for Madiba in prison. Only God can thank you. You are amazing, Winnie Mandela. And you know that was the first time that Nelson Mandela had held a child for 14 years. And that was the risk that Christo took to show him his grandchild. Our story moves forward now to 1982 when Christo wanted to get married. There were no married quarters available on Robben Island. And so he applied to be moved to Pollsmoor Prison, which is on the mainland of Cape Town. For those of you who know Cape Town, if you look at that photograph, how ironic that Pollsmoor Prison is located alongside Steenberg Golf Course, which is one of the most expensive properties in South Africa. Christo is married and he's get put in charge of the Mandela Group because at exactly the same time, the authorities decided to move the 4 most powerful prisoners from Robben Island to Pollsmoor. And Christo is now put in charge of Mandela and the 3 others for the next 6 years. Christo sees them on a daily basis. On the roof of the prison, he starts playing tennis with Nelson Mandela. He also helps Nelson Mandela establish a garden on the roof of the maximum security prison on the right-hand photograph. And Christo is in daily contact with Mandela. And as you can all imagine, over the course of 6 years, there were umpteen incidents that happened between the 2 men. We are going to share one with you this evening. Christo is going to share what happened on one particular Christmas day when he came back from his Christmas lunch and Mandela came to ask him a favor. Christo.
That day was Christmas and the prisoners was locked between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And after 2 o'clock, when I opened the cell, Mandela walked to me and he said, Mr. Brandt, it is Christmas Day today. All over the world, people celebrate this day. But us as prisoners could have not celebrated because no visitors have visited us at all the whole month. Can we celebrate this day with you as guards? I asked him, Mandela, how do you want to do that? He said, Mr. Brandt, if we sit around the table and drink a coffee, that will be a Christmas celebration for us. So I spoke to the other warders. We all agree. Mandela dished up the table. He put a blanket on the table. There was coffee, there was cool drink, there was dried fruits, there was sweet chocolate sweets, and there was fruitcake. And we shared it with them. And after the celebration was lock-up time. When I take them back to their cell, I stopped Mandela. I said, Mandela, there's something I must tell you today. First time in my life, I sat with a prisoner around the table, enjoying a Christmas. Everything was good, but your fruitcake was very bad. He's quiet for a while. He looked back. He said, Mr. Brandt, you forget something. You was the one who bought us the fruitcake. Immediately, I must protect. And I said, Mandela, you know, you are right. You know, this big shopping mall baked fruitcake in bulk. They only bake for Muslim people fruitcake. And my wife baked fruitcake in October, November, dose it with brandies and liqueurs, and then we eat it tonight. But I will bring you a piece of fruitcake tomorrow. The next day, I take him a piece of fruitcake. He shared it with his comrades. I forget about the fruitcake. In that year after that, in November, Mandela handed in an application to me because prisoners must apply it in writing for special privilege like Christmas Day. So I applied for his 500-gram fruitcake, 500 gram of dried fruit, 500 gram of chocolate sweets. When they hand it to me, I must still take it to the head of the prison for approval, to deduct the money from their property, to buy these items. That moment when he gave it to me, he said, Mr. Brandt, can you make sure the fruitcake is from your wife? I look at him, I said, Mandela, that will be very difficult, but I will try and see what I can do. So I organized with my wife. She baked fruitcake for other warders, which she agreed. I deduct the money from their properties. I paid her. She was happy, and we carry on like that. But when Mandela was released, after release, he phoned me at home. He spoke to my son. In that November, he phoned again, and he spoke to my wife, and he applied to her and thanked her for the fruitcake over the years. And then he asked her again for a fruitcake for that Christmas. She didn't realize she was baking for them fruitcake. So she baked a fruitcake for him, and she was baking fruitcake for him till he passed. So that is where our relationship is also with the fruitcake.
All right, and just another remarkable story of how this friendship developed through this fruitcake. And without making you all too jealous, I would like to just let you know that I am on Estelle Brandt's official fruitcake Christmas list. So there you go. Our journey now moves forward to the 11th of February 1990, and this iconic photograph of Nelson Mandela being released from Victor Verster prison after 27.5 years in prison. He gets taken to the City Hall in Cape Town, where he delivers his first speech as a free man. And on the 10th of May 1994, Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first democratically elected president of South Africa. And some of you may know that before 1994, in any general election in South Africa, only white adults had been allowed to vote. This was the first election where adults of all different races could cast their vote. The ANC won the election, and Nelson Mandela became our president. And now, for the next few years, Christo is in touch with Nelson Mandela on numerous occasions. Here are just some of the photographs of Christo with Nelson Mandela at birthday parties, private functions, and so they were in regular contact. I want to move on now with Christo to chat about Nelson Mandela's relationship with his son. And one of the things that Nelson Mandela always spoke about was the power of education. Education is the great engine of personal development. It is through education that the daughter of a peasant can become a doctor, that the son of a mine worker can become the head of the mine, that a child of farm workers can become the president of a great nation. It is what we make out of what we have, not what we are given, that separates one person from another. Nelson Mandela. And so, Christo, can you now share with our friends the relationship which existed between Nelson Mandela and your son, starting off from when he was a baby, through to the letter that he wrote for him, and then after he finished school, what Nelson Mandela arranged for him?
In 1985, that was the time Mandela was in isolation in Portsmouth Prison, underground in the basement of the maximum security prison. The reason for that, that was the time he started with negotiations. But there was one evening, the Minister of Justice phoned me at home. I must take an urgent message for Mandela that he wanted to meet 11 o'clock that night. And it was 7 o'clock the evening. So that evening, my wife was out. I take my baby infant with me to Mandela's cell because I could not leave him at home alone. And when I walked in, Mandela was so excited to see my baby. He was about 13 months old. He wanted to hold him, wanted to touch him. My son didn't want to go to the old man until he started feeding him some sweets. After that, I take him on a regular basis to this isolation cell of Mandela because I was a warrant officer at that stage. And after Mandela's release, he was phoning me at home, where he spoke to my son on the phone. I was not at home that day. When he became president, he had met my son on numerous occasions. But one morning in Parliament, he called me to his office, and he was busy drafting a letter. And he said, this letter you gave to your son the next morning. This letter was for my son's 16th birthday. So my son was very excited to receive the letter from the president. After that, he was also more in touch with us as a family. And then 2 years later, Mandela called me again one day to his office. He said, Brand, what is your son going to study next year? Because he's my responsibility. I said, Mandela, I'm looking to try to get him in at a university. He want to do civil engineering. He said, that's good. But don't tell your boy anything. I will get him a scholarship and I will get him into university. 2 weeks passed, Mandela phoned me at home the evening. He said, I got a scholarship for your son, but he will be a few months at home. It's only the next year in October, and that's in New York. So my comrades will look after him. Everything is paid in full. So I was very happy and excited. I called my son and explained him Mandela get a scholarship for him in New York. My son was not happy. He was very disappointed. He said he don't want to leave the country. He want to become a commercial diver first for a year or 2 years, and then he will study further in that direction. But he first want to have a gap year. And I was not happy with that. I phoned the next morning immediately the president, and when I explained him that, he's quiet on the other side, and then he come back to me after a few seconds. He said, Brand, can you bring the boy to my house today? 2 o'clock, I will be at home. That day, 2 o'clock, I take my son to Mandela's house. When we arrived there, he greeted us very friendly, and then he went and spoke alone with my son, man on man, he said. After 15 minutes, he called me into the meeting. He said, Brand, you knew our parents all made the same mistakes in life. My parents done the same. They want to push us in directions, and we never listen to the child. We must listen to our children. If your son want to become a commercial diver, I will support him. I will pay for it. I will send him for the course. And let him do what he wants. If he fail in that, he want to study further, there will be opportunities. I will help him with that. So my son signed up, and Mandela arranged a scholarship, and he's paid, and he became a commercial diver. Then immediately after that, he get a job also on Robben Island, where he worked with the extension of the harbor wall, deepen of constructions, and all these things. 2005, my son died in a car accident. Without me informed Mandela about the death of my son, he was the one who phoned me on that morning when I was on the way to the hospital to identify his body. And he said to me on the phone, Brand, a parent must never lose a child. And he started explaining to me how he felt when he lost his elder son, Tembekile, himself in a car accident, where he could have not been there for his son, there could have not been attend a funeral, nothing. So how bad it is for a parent to lose a child. A child must rather lose a parent. Then he said to me, he's not in South Africa at the moment, he's in Mozambique. He won't be able to be in time for the funeral. I said, Mandela, I not really expect you must attend, but thanks for contacting me. So he said, when I'm back in South Africa, we'll meet. 2 weeks later, Mandela was back in South Africa. He contacted me immediately. He wanted to meet me and my wife and my other son immediately. So I have a long conversation with us. And after that, he started pressurizing me to write a book. He was on my case for 6 years till he gave up on me, and he sent a lady to me with a contract we signed through him. And she said to me, Mr. Brand, I just came from the president, and the president said, I must tell you, I'm not getting younger, I'm getting older. I can't wait anymore for your book. He said, you must give all your scripts and notes and things, and the two of us will sit together, and she and the president will sit together, and they will help me to finalize my book. So I handed it all over to her. And what happened then? My book was ready. The president called me in, was very excited. Then it was sent to the publisher for outlaying the photos and everything. And then Mandela gets sick. And then after, my book was delayed, and then Mandela passed.
And so Christo's book is now ready, but unfortunately on this day in 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away. And so the book was delayed until the following year. And Christo is now invited as a guest of Nelson Mandela's family to attend his funeral. And how appropriate was it that Nelson Mandela chose to be buried in that small village of Kunu, which I told you about at the start of our conversation, where he spent the happiest years of his life. That was where he chose for his final resting place. And Christo, as I say, was invited as a guest of the family. Christo, can you now share, as we get to the end of our conversation, just some memories and reflections which you had on that day in Kunu when you attended Nelson Mandela's funeral?
That day at the funeral, I was sat behind Zinzi Mandela part as the family. And I said to myself, when a coffin passed, I must touch the coffin to say goodbye to my friend. When a coffin was parked in front, I looked at the coffin and said to myself, for 27.5 years, this old man was in prison. For 14 years, he slept on 2 mats and 3 blankets, treated like a dog. 14 years he worked in a limestone quarry, breaking lime rock, and nearly lost his eyesight. After that, he worked on the rocks, taking sea kelp out of the sea. Slipped on the rocks, broke his ankle, fractured his knee, broke some ribs, but he walked out of prison with reconciliation in his heart. Then I think back when my prisoner became president, I was very excited and happy. But there was one morning when he invited me for coffee as president. I sat with him and we have a conversation. I said to him, President Mandela, there's something I must tell you today. He said, what's the problem, Mr. Brandt? You can tell me anything. I said, you don't feel like a president of our country for me. You still feel like a prisoner. He asked me why. I said, because when you was a president, or when you was a prisoner on Robben Island, you was guarded by prison warders. When you was released, you walked out as a free man, but I never see you free walking in a shopping mall. You was guarded by private security. Now you're the president, you're still guarded by police, still like a prisoner. He looked at me, he's quiet for a while. Then he said to me, Brandt, you are right. But today, this prisoner can tell the police in what direction to walk. So I let me believe he's feeling free. Then a few months after that, he called me back for coffee, made me sit, and he pointed me with a finger. And he said, Brandt, you said I'm a prisoner. I tell my security, I don't want to see them on sight. I was on holiday in Bahamas. I want to walk alone in this beach to feel how it feels to be a free man. He said, I didn't walk too far. Then I see a young couple approach me, greet me very friendly and polite. Then a young lady looked at me and she said, sorry, sir, are you not President Nelson Mandela? He said, Mr. Brandt, then I get worried. Oh, what I tell that young lady that morning, I said, ma'am, I would love to meet that guy myself one day. So she made excuse, she said, sorry, she walked away. Then I think back when we visited school, that morning when we walked out of the school, Mandela showed me the rugby field. He said, Brandt, look there, black and white children playing together. I said, President Mandela, when you become the president, the schools are multiracial, open for all colors today. He said, that's good, that's very good. Slowly walked on. After a while, he stopped again. He said, Brandt, look there. That black child is sharing an apple with a white child. I look at him, I said, President Mandela, if you look at that small kids, they don't see a color, they just enjoy life. He said, Mr. Brandt, you are right. That's a rainbow nation I want to see develop in my country. Remember, we tried to change Robben Island into a university. We take over a government. We never run a government before. Somewhere in the line, my comrades going to fail, and they're failing big time because they're not all educated. He said, but it's a time now to educate this youth. They will be our future leaders of our country. So I believe the youth will still stand up and guide our country in different direction. Then 3 months after the funeral, I was invited to the UK for my book launch. And that evening when I arrived there, Zinzi Mandela was there and she pointed me the finger from a distance when she see me and give me a hug. And she said to me, Mr. Brandt, you can't run away from me. My last promise to my dad was, he said if he can't get your book launch, I must represent him. So she was there talking on my behalf on my book launch in Waterford, Piccadilly in the UK. So my book was very well received in the UK.
Okay, and so here is the other gentleman in our story's Long Walk to Freedom autobiography, which he signed a copy and gave to Christo and his family, which he wrote in Afrikaans, best wishes to a remarkable family, Nelson Mandela. And here are the two direct quotes from his book where he mentions Christo. One of the warders, a very pleasant young man named Warrant Officer Brunt, actually took me to his family's flat and introduced me to his wife and children. From then on, I sent his children Christmas cards every year. And men like Warrant Officer Brunt reinforced my belief in the essential humanity, even of those who have kept me behind bars the previous 27 and a half years. Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. And so that is where we finish this journey of these two men. But we want to say good luck to each and every one of you on your own journey, wherever it may take you. And to leave you with our favorite quote from Nelson Mandela: what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. Nelson Mandela. And so as we finish our journey, there are our contact details. If any of you would like to contact us, or through the chairman, if you do have your own 41 club possibly who would like to hear Christo's story, or any other special interest group, please get hold of us. We would love to share Christo's story with you. And I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and pass back to the chairman to handle your questions for Christo. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Andrew. Before we go on to the vote of thanks, I've got to say one thing before I ask you the questions that have been coming up, is that I've never heard the audience so silent on one of our 41 Connects meetings before, because normally we have people talking in the background, etc., but you spoke to complete silence, so well done. I've run through the questions that have come up on the chat whilst we've been doing this. First one was from Derek Scott, who asks, did Nelson ever talk about his plans after release from prison? With you, Christo.
If Nelson have any talk about his plans?
Yes.
Okay, Nelson never talked about his plans when he left prison. You know, I was thinking when Mandela left prison, he was still going on with negotiations with government. Maybe that time government will have a spot in parliament also for African people in South Africa. That year there was an Indian party, a colored party, and a white party ruling the parliament. I was thinking there will come an election and Mandela maybe get a spot into that and leading African people in the country. But he never talked about his plans, what he's going to do when he walked out of prison.
The next question is from David Illingworth. It's a personal question for you. He asks, were you working at Mandela's prison? I take it he means Robben Island in 2001. Were you working there as a guide or working there? Because he says if you so, he might have actually met you before.
Okay.
Howard Barton says that I heard from that past presidents, Botha and then de Klerk, had regular, as much as monthly meetings with Mr. Mandela for several years before his release. Is that true?
That's true, but the first meeting was 1985 with Kobie Coetsee, the Minister of Justice, which visited Mandela in hospital with his prostate operation. That is where Mandela was put in isolation after that, because the government of the time was worried if this leaked out that they spoke to the ANC, it would reflect bad on South Africa. But at the same time, the ANC didn't want to communicate with the government of the time. So that's why they put Mandela in isolation and have some talks. But the first biggest leader Mandela met after that was P.W. Botha. You know, Mandela told me himself, he said, Mr. Brandt, that day when I visit P.W. Botha, I take him there with a car. We open the door and he get out of the car. He said he knew when he walked to P.W. Botha, this man won't take a black man's hand. He knew that. But when he get out of the car, P.W. Botha stand with his arms folded. And then when Mandela get out, he walked to Mandela and he greeted him by hand. He was shocked. And when he take him around the shoulder to walk him into parliament, to the president's offices, P.W. Botha stopped Mandela and said, sorry. And he go down to the knees and he tightened Mandela's shoelace. Mandela said that was totally a shock and surprise for him. He know the meeting was not very successful, but he said he got a better success out of that meeting than he negotiated with de Klerk. De Klerk was just rushing everything fast, but he had more trust that he should have worked things better out with P.W. Botha. They tried to convince him. That's where, when he became president, he visited P.W. Botha on a few occasions after he retired.
Okay. The next one's rather a large question. It's, what is life in South Africa like for you both now? And that's from Alan Short.
Okay, life in South Africa now at the moment is, Mandela laid a foundation for the new South Africa. He was building up our country and bring black and white together with rugby, sports, everything in the country. After that, when Jacob Zuma take over, everything falls apart, a lot of corruptions and things. But I believe our country will go to the better because Mandela have his trust in Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa was also my boss in parliament when I worked there. He had his trust in him because he was the one who get the constitution adopted for the National Party and the ANC at that time. And he wanted him there. But Cyril Ramaphosa's hand has been cut. He got a lot of people which is corrupt around him. So he's busy opening up the corruption, bring the people forward that the outside world can see what's happening. And I'm sure if he sort that out and he put people in places to replace that people, our country will become better.
Asa asks, what was the sentence Mandela had and for what? And did he serve his full time?
Okay, Mandela was sentenced first for 5 years to leave the country illegally. Then he was sent to Robben Island. While he was in Robben Island, mixed with criminal prisoners, they raided a farm in Johannesburg, Lily's Leaf. And Lily's Leaf, they arrested a lot of people and they found documentation of Mandela there. Tried to overthrow the country, they say. But he was attacking military spots and things and made attention of black people in South Africa wanted freedom. But for that, Mandela was sentenced then for life imprisonment. They were thinking he was going to get that death sentence, and he was all believed that. But Mandela was a lawyer, and he drafted a letter, and he said in that letter in court, which he read out, he said, I'm prepared to die what I stand for. And when they get a life sentence, he was happy. They could have still be alive. They can still fight the struggle from the inside.
And Eric asks, did Mandela ever discuss Robert Mugabe?
That time we never talk about Robert Mugabe. Mandela has not discussed politicians in prison, and we never knew about Robert Mugabe really as that much. It was not that much in the news, but Mandela never talked about him.
Mike Davidson asks, are you optimistic for the future of South Africa?
If I'm optimistic for the news for South Africa,
yes,
I'm optimistic. We have put hope and we put trust in the government, and we hope things can work out. That because people are start meeting again, and that this corruption can be sorted out. We have optimistic things will change in a few years to come.
Right. Liam Williams asks, did you continue your career as a prison officer after Mandela was released? Or did
after Mandela was released, I was still a prison officer till end of 1994. Then Mandela gave me a job in Parliament where he worked in his office for a short while. Then he introduced me to Cyril Ramaphosa where he worked with the drafting of the new constitution. After that was adopted, 96, Mandela gave me a job off at the Mandela Foundation, but that was far out of Cape Town, Johannesburg. I didn't want to move that time and explain it to the old man. Then he discussed it with Ahmad Kathradra because he declared Robben Island at that moment as a museum. So I started working at the museum ticket sales, and I opened curio shops. And every time Mandela visited Robben Island with Obama, Gaddafi, and these people, he wanted me to be part of that tour. He wanted to introduce me to the people. So I worked at Robben Island until 2018. And now I speak my old gospel, my book, and I speak my relationship with Mandela to conferences of people.
Very good. We've had a question here. Did your friendship with Madiba affect your relationship with fellow warders? And was it ever difficult?
What happened where it got Mandela, the people didn't know about our friendship. That only, we was selected of warders who worked with him, and we all become half a friendship with Mandela because we didn't want to work with criminals, especially at Paulsmoor prison. Robben Island, I work in a central office, and all the guys who work with me, they come from rural areas, grow up with black people, understand their language. And so we were close. But after Mandela's release, one of my superiors, the head of the prison, stopped at the petrol station and said to me, "You're a sellout. If we should have knew you become friends with these prisoners, only come out now. We should have locked you up and killed you, and you should have also disappeared." and he didn't trust me. He was very upset with me. But that same guy came back 5 years after that, and he said to me, he apologized to me what he said to me. He said, pity Mandela was so old when he came out of prison. He never believed Mandela will walk out of prison with reconciliation in his heart. He was, and bring people together with the World Cup 1995 and sports in South Africa. And he was totally changed his attitude and mind toward Mandela.
I think in this country, certainly most people's vision of Mandela is affected more by the film Invictus than by anything else. And Morgan Freeman's version of Mandela from Invictus.
Okay.
That's an incredible film.
Yes.
Peter McBride has said, how do you feel Mandela would feel about South Africa today? Proud or disappointed?
I didn't understand quick, sorry.
What would Mandela think about South Africa today, do you think? Would he be proud or would he be disappointed about how things have happened since?
It's Peter McBride. I just want to tell him there was two McBrides in Robben Island in prison, sorry. But Mandela should have been very disappointed if he see what's happening in South Africa. But he will put his trust and belief in Cyril Ramaphosa. And he should have tried to solve this problem. But Mandela has seen things go wrong in the country because he realized and knew all his comrades was not well educated. And that was the biggest thing. And Mandela said on Robben Island, he tried to change the prison into university. And the most important thing for Mandela in life was to educate people. The more they can get education, the better they can lead and help their families.
Okay. Christo, Steve James asks, did Nelson Mandela always call you by your surname?
No. Mandela always called me by my rank when he's in front of other prison warders. But if we are separate, he will tell me Mr. Brandt. But when he be in Parliament, he called me on Mr. Brandt. If I am in private clothes, Mr. Brandt. But if I'm in uniform, you respect your uniform by the rank.
And Rachel Wilson, or at least that's what the computer that signed in, has said, were you at the amazing rugby match when South Africa won the World Cup in 1995?
Yes, we were very excited, very happy, very pleased. And Mandela also celebrated with the people. He was not a rugby fan when he was in prison, but he became a rugby fan after certain things happened in prison, and we guide him through the rugby, yes.
Jim Conway asks, if you had to describe Nelson in 3 words, what would they be?
Good, humble, and respectful person.
Great. And Eric asks, did Mandela see Zuma for what he proved to be?
No, I don't think Mandela seen. He was thinking maybe better hopes for Zuma. He never thought Zuma will go in that direction. I'm sure of it.
Keith Howard, says it's not a question, but he has the sad task of arranging a Thanksgiving service for his late wife. One of the pieces of music she had requested is Nkosi Sikelel' Africa. We have no connection with Africa, but she adored Nelson Mandela. I'm making that you all that. Pontus of 41 Club Norway is saying, what an honour it is to be able to hear your story.
Thank you.
And Graham Dix says he's always fondly emotional at this incredible Mandela period for South Africa. Today, it appears to be there's a spiral of declining corruption, but is there anyone in the government that you believe could make the changes necessary?
Yeah, I can't think of somebody, but the only person which I can think can make a change, if they can give him the strength, will be Cyril Ramaphosa. He can choose his own people to put in places, and which is well educated to change this country to the better.
Okay. Rob wants to know how the British Lions will get on against the Springboks.
If the what?
How the British Lions will get on against the Springboks.
Well, we're waiting with bated breath for this contest. It's going to be wonderful. We don't know if there'll be crowds or whether we'll be able to welcome all of you, but we're looking forward to it immensely.
John Allen says Namibia are seeking compensation from Germany for their treatment in the early 20th century. And do you think South Africa will follow suit against Great Britain? This is reparations payments, basically, he's asking.
No.
I think
I'm not sure.
It's a high politics question.
I'm not sure. One of the things I've got to realize about Christo working with him for the last couple of years is that he's not a politician. You know, he's a very humble, down-to-earth person, and that's just how he is. And I think that's what made the two of them such close friends.
Well, I think I'll draw a line under those questions now. And anyone else who obviously has questions, they have your email contacts and they can forward them to you afterwards. But I'm going to call upon Stephen James to propose the vote of thanks. So,
thank you, Don. Baya Danke, Christo and Andrew. A truly remarkable talk, and thank you very much for sharing your life experiences with everyone tonight. I'm sure, as Don said, we just sat there. It was awe-inspiring. Nelson Mandela was a true icon and one of the world's greatest leaders of the 20th century. And what an absolute honour it must have been to look after him in prison, but also the friendship that ensued later when he was released, and what he did for you and your family and giving you a job and the help with your son. I was fortunate enough to actually be in Cardiff Castle in 1998 when he was given the honour of the Freedom of the City. And it was truly humbling experience. So to spend every day with such an inspirational, influential leader must have been awe-inspiring. And I think all of us would have loved to be in your shoes just to spend even an hour with Nelson Mandela. I'm going to try my Afrikaans again. Wirens Baya Danke. And can I ask everyone, Mark, if we can unmute and everyone to show their appreciation in the usual way?
Thank you. Fantastic night. Amazing.
Well done. Good.
Excellent. Christo and Andrew.
Thank you.
Really
wonderful. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's the formal end of the evening, but I've told Christo and Andrew that we normally get people staying on for effectively a quiet drink at the bar afterwards. And gentlemen, you're welcome to stay longer and ask a question. But otherwise, thank you very much once again. It's been an absolute great pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderfully.